When I opened my bag, I was shocked to see a strange device inside. Sensing that something was terribly wrong, I brought it to the nearest police station. After examining it, an officer came out to meet me, his face pale with sheer terror. "You're in danger, ma'am. This isn't just an ordinary device." I was absolutely paralyzed by shock when I heard his explanation. But before we dive into today's true crime story, please drop a comment below and let us know what state or country you're listening from. Don't forget to like and subscribe so our channel can keep growing and bringing down you more thrilling stories. The atmosphere in the master bedroom was quiet and peaceful. The only sound was the soft hum of the central air conditioning, blanketing the night. The hands of the wall clock ticked in a steady rhythm, pointing exactly to 3:00 a.m. Emily was in a deep, restful sleep, her dreams distant and hazy. However, that tranquility was shattered instantly when the phone on her nightstand rang piercingly. The ringtone sliced through the silence of the night like a long scream, forcing her consciousness back to the surface. Emily jolted awake, her heart pounding against her ribs. She blinked, trying to gather her senses that were still scattered in the dream world. Her hand fumbled in the dark to grab her cell phone. Who would be calling at this ungodly hour, she thought, a knot of dread forming in her stomach. Late-night calls never brought good news. With trembling hands, she swiped to answer and pressed the phone to her ear. Her voice was raspy as she greeted the caller. A man's voice, panicked and rushed, spoke on the other end. He introduced himself as a neighbor of her mother, Martha, from her rural hometown upstate. Without beating around the bush, he delivered news that made Emily's blood run ice cold. He told her that Martha had suddenly collapsed, lost consciousness, and was in critical condition. Emily's breath hitched. The image of her aging mother living all alone in that old farmhouse flooded her mind. Tears immediately pooled in her eyes. The terrifying thought of losing the person she loved most choked her, making it hard to breathe. The man on the phone urged Emily to come, immediately saying her mother's condition was deteriorating by the second. Emily dropped the phone onto the bed, her hands shaking violently. She turned to her side and shook her husband. Aaron was asleep, his back turned to her. Emily cried out his name, in a panic. Aaron shifted slowly, opening his eyes with a look of mild annoyance, though he remained remarkably calm. Through her tears, Emily stammered out that her mother was dying, and she had to drive upstate right this second. She expected Aaron to leap out of bed, throw on some clothes, and drive her like any supportive, protective husband would. But Aaron's reaction was entirely unexpected. He sat up on the edge of the bed, slowly rubbed his face, and looked at Emily with an unreadable expression. He didn't look panicked at all. Aaron gripped Emily's shoulders, trying to calm her with a voice that was soft but firm. He told her how much he wanted to go with her, but reminded her that today was a make-or-break day for his career. He brought up the crucial board meeting scheduled for that afternoon. That meeting would determine the future of his firm and his position as a senior executive. If he didn't show up, years of hard work would go down the drain, and they could lose everything. Emily fell silent. A sharp pang of disappointment pierced her heart. In a critical moment like this, she desperately needed a shoulder to lean on, but she also knew how relentlessly Aaron worked to maintain their comfortable upper-middle-class lifestyle. Emily was a supportive wife, always trying to understand the pressures of his corporate job. With a heavy heart, she swallowed her pride. She told him she understood and would make the drive alone. Aaron nodded in agreement, saying it was the best option. He told her to get dressed quickly while he went downstairs to warm up the car and pack some supplies for her road trip so she wouldn't have to worry about a thing. Emily rushed to the master bathroom to splash cold water on her puffy face. The chill on her skin helped her think a bit more clearly. Even though the anxiety about her mother's condition consumed her, she quickly threw on a comfortable sweater, a pair of jeans, and wrapped a warm cashmere scarf around her neck. There was no time to fuss in front of the mirror. Her mind was already racing miles away to her mother's house, a good 4-hour drive from their suburban Chicago home. She prayed silently, begging God to keep her mother alive until she got there. Meanwhile, downstairs, Aaron was busy in the kitchen and the garage. He grabbed Emily's leather overnight bag and started stuffing things inside. He tossed in a few bottles of water, some granola bars, and a pack of tissues. His movements were remarkably calm and calculated, not at all like a man whose wife was dealing with a family tragedy. After packing the snacks, Aaron pulled a small box from a hidden drawer in his home office. He stared at it for a moment with cold, dead eyes, then shoved it deep into the bottom of Emily's bag, hiding it beneath a spare jacket. He zipped the bag shut and carried it out to the garage. Emily hurried down the stairs. She saw Aaron standing next to her white sedan. The engine was already purring smoothly. Aaron opened the driver's side door for her and tossed the overnight bag onto the passenger seat. He looked at her with eyes that seemed full of concern. He told her to drive safely, not to speed, and to text him the moment she arrived. Emily nodded, fresh tears falling down her cheeks. She felt guilty for leaving him alone to deal with the house and his stressful workday, but her worry for her mother was far greater. She hugged him tightly. Aaron kissed her forehead, a kiss that felt oddly routine, but to Emily, it was a source of strength. She climbed into the car and buckled her seatbelt, taking a deep breath to steady her racing heart. Aaron closed the door and signaled for her to go. The car slowly backed out of their sprawling driveway. As she accelerated down the quiet suburban street, Emily glanced in her rearview mirror. She saw Aaron standing on the dimly lit porch. He didn't immediately go back inside. He stood perfectly still, watching her taillights fade. From a distance, his face was obscured by the shadows. Emily couldn't see his expression, but something about his posture gave her a deeply unsettling feeling. He pulled his smartphone out of his pajama pocket and started typing rapidly, instead of waving goodbye like he usually did. Emily brushed off the weird feeling. She figured he was probably just emailing his colleagues to prep for the big meeting. She needed to focus on the road. The drive upstate would take about 4 to 5 hours if the traffic was light. At this hour, the interstate would be empty, and she could make good time. The image of her mother's smiling face filled her mind again. She prayed this wouldn't be the last time she saw her. With fierce determination, Emily pressed the gas pedal, slicing through the pre-dawn darkness, leaving her home and her husband disappearing behind the bend. What Emily didn't realize was that back on the quiet porch, Aaron was smiling faintly after hitting send on a text message. He didn't go back to bed or prep for his board meeting. Instead, he strolled into the custom kitchen, brewed a fresh cup of espresso, and sat on the living room sofa looking incredibly satisfied. It was as if a massive weight had just been lifted off his shoulders. The plan he had so meticulously crafted was finally in motion. To him, Emily's departure tonight wasn't a trip to visit a sick mother. It was the beginning of an end he had been eagerly waiting for. The interstate stretched out in front of Emily like an endless black tunnel. The amber glow of the highway lights flashed overhead one by one, creating a hypnotic rhythm of light and shadow. Because it was still the dead of night, traffic was non-existent. There were only 1 or 2 massive 1/8 wheelers cruising slowly in the right lane. Other than that, the highway belonged to her. The silence in the cabin was broken only by the hum of the tires on the asphalt and the soft worship music playing from her car's audio system at a low volume. She needed that peace to keep her heart steady. She pushed the car to a fast clip. The speedometer needle hovered steadily above the speed limit. Every passing second felt like torture as she imagined her mother fighting for her life alone. But amidst her anxiety, Emily began to notice something strange about her car. At first, she thought it was just her imagination, a trick played by her exhausted, sleep-deprived brain. But as the miles rolled on, the feeling became undeniable. The car, which usually drove like a dream, felt slightly heavy. There was a subtle, unnatural vibration creeping up from the floorboards into the steering wheel. It wasn't the normal rattle of a bumpy road. It sounded like a low, constant hum, as if something was attached to the undercarriage, messing with the car's aerodynamics. Emily tried to ignore it, thinking the car just needed a routine service that Aaron had forgotten to schedule. An hour passed, and she was far past the city limits. The darkness on either side of the highway grew thicker, dominated by invisible pine forests and empty farmland. Suddenly, the low fuel indicator on the dashboard lit up, blinking a bright orange. Emily frowned. She vividly remembered Aaron telling her just 2 days ago that he had filled the tank. Was the car burning fuel that fast, or had he just forgotten? She eased off the gas. She couldn't risk breaking down on a deserted highway. She spotted a green exit sign for a rest stop and gas station, about 3 miles ahead. She decided to pull over. Besides getting gas, she needed to use the restroom and splash her face again to stay alert. The rest area was a ghost town. There were only a couple of semi-trucks parked in the back with the drivers asleep inside, and an old sedan parked far off in the corner. The neon lights of the gas station canopy buzzed loudly, swarmed by moths. The lone gas station attendant was dozing off on a stool behind the register. After parking at the pump and getting out to insert her credit card, Emily sat back in the driver's seat. Her body ached. She reached over to the bag Aaron had packed to grab her wallet. As she dug her hand inside, she felt the tightly packed items, the water bottles, granola bars, and a heavy jacket. She dug deeper to find the inner pocket where she usually kept her wallet. But instead of the soft leather of her purse, her fingertips brushed against something cold, hard, and metallic. Emily furrowed her brow. She didn't own anything like that. Intrigued, she pulled aside the jacket, covering the bottom of the bag. Tucked underneath was a black metal box, about the size of a small brick. It looked completely alien. No brand name, no labels, just a sturdy black casing with a few thin wires visible near the seams. What made Emily's heart suddenly hammer against her ribs was a tiny indicator light on the side of the box pulsing with a faint red glow. Slowly, Emily lifted the box out of the bag. It was surprisingly heavy. She turned it over under the dim dome light of the car. This isn't a portable charger, she thought. The build was too raw, too industrial to be a normal electronic accessory. It wasn't a Wi-Fi hotspot either. A dark, creeping dread began to crawl up the back of her neck. Why would Aaron put this in her bag? Was it some sort of tech equipment from his office that got mixed up? But why hide it at the very bottom? And why was the light blinking as if it were actively running? She looked for a power button, worried it might drain the battery or damage her things. She found a small toggle switch on the side. Without thinking much of it, Emily flicked it. But instead of turning off the light, which had been pulsing a slow red, suddenly flashed yellow and began blinking at a rapid, frantic pace. A rhythmic, high-pitched beep echoed in the quiet cabin. Beep, beep, beep. It sounded exactly like a digital countdown, an icy chill shot from her fingertips straight to her core. Her instincts screamed that something was wrong. Very wrong. She flashed back to action movies she used to watch with Aaron, movies featuring GPS trackers, or worse, explosives. But this was the real world and she was just a normal suburban wife. There was no way something like that was in her bag. She tried to brush off the paranoia, but the vibrating terror in her chest refused to leave. She looked out the window at the empty gas station. The world outside looked perfectly normal. But inside this car, Emily felt like she was holding a deadly secret. With agonizing care, she placed the object back onto the passenger seat, treating it as if it were made of the thinnest, most fragile glass. Trembling violently, she grabbed her wallet, finished pumping the gas without saying a word to the attendant, and quickly rolled up her window. Her urge to use the restroom had completely vanished, replaced by an irrational yet overpowering terror. She stared at the black box. It just kept blinking yellow. Her mind was a hurricane. Should she call Aaron and ask? But a small, quiet voice in the back of her head stopped her. The memory of Aaron on the porch, that unreadable faint smile, his decision not to come with her. All those puzzle pieces started spinning in her mind. If Aaron put this in her bag and if it was dangerous, calling him was the worst possible idea. Emily took a deep breath, fighting to maintain her composure. She couldn't panic. She had to find out what this thing was. She started the engine, but she didn't merge back onto the interstate. Her gut told her that driving at high speeds with this strange device was a death sentence. She remembered seeing a sign a few miles back for a county sheriff's substation. That had to be the safest place right now. She would ask the cops to look at it. If it was just some harmless office gadget, she'd apologize for wasting their time and get back on the road. But if it was something else, she didn't even want to finish the thought. With her hands slick with cold sweat, Emily turned the steering wheel, exiting the gas station through a back road, driving away from the highway and heading down a dark, empty arterial route toward the police station. The box on the seat next to her kept beeping, beep, 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 like a travel companion delivering a message of death. She pushed the car through the night, no longer racing to save her mother but racing to save her own life from this terrifying unknown. Emily swerved into the parking lot of the sheriff's substation. It was dead quiet but brightly illuminated by security floodlights. The building was modest, a flat brick structure with an American flag flapping lazily on the pole out front. A single cruiser and a couple of personal vehicles were parked in the lot, acting purely on survival instinct. Emily parked her car far away from the main entrance, putting as much distance between the vehicle and the building as possible. When she killed the engine, the silence returned, punctuated only by the rhythmic beeping of the black box, which now felt intensely hostile. Hands shaking, Emily grabbed it. She carried it with excruciating care, feeling as though she were holding her own beating heart. She stepped out of the car and jogged toward the front desk. The biting night air whipped her scarf around, yet cold sweat soaked the back of her shirt. Inside the lobby, a young rookie deputy who had been fighting off sleep at the front desk shot up in his chair when he saw a pale, hyperventilating woman rush in at 4:00 a.m. Emily placed the black box on the wooden counter with stiff robotic movements. The young deputy frowned, looking at the foreign object with its rapidly flashing yellow light. Emily tried to speak, but the words lodged in her throat. She could only point at it, stammering that she had found it hidden in her bag and felt it was dangerous. The deputy looked confused and reached out, probably assuming it was just a broken piece of consumer electronics. But before his fingers could graze the metal casing, a booming authoritative voice stopped him dead in his tracks. "Don't touch that." An older man, in full uniform bearing the silver oak leaves of a police captain on his collar, strode out from the back offices. It was Captain Reynolds, the precinct commander, who happened to be pulling an all-nighter on a pile of paperwork. His sharp eyes immediately locked onto the black box. His normally relaxed face hardened into intense focus in a fraction of a second. He ordered the rookie to step back immediately. Captain Reynolds slowly approached the counter. He studied the blink pattern and the hair-thin wires peeking from the seams, keeping his hands strictly behind his back. The atmosphere in the lobby instantly turned suffocating. Reynolds looked at Emily with piercing seriousness and asked where she got it. Voice trembling, Emily explained she found it in her travel bag while driving out of the city. Reynolds gave a curt nod and unclipped his radio. He spoke rapidly in police 10 codes that Emily didn't fully understand, but the sheer urgency in his tone was unmistakable. He was calling in the regional EOD Explosive Ordnance Disposal Squad, telling them to roll out immediately. Hearing the word explosive, Emily's knees buckled. She had to grip the edge of the counter to keep from collapsing onto the linoleum floor. Captain Reynolds gently guided her to a sturdy wooden bench further back in the room, away from the glass doors. He ordered his deputies to clear the front parking lot and lock the station's main doors. He knelt in front of Emily, keeping his voice as steady and calming as possible to prevent her from going into full-blown shock. He explained that the device she brought in wasn't the bomb itself, it was a highly sophisticated remote detonator. This kind of tech is custom-built by a professional, not an amateur, the veteran cop explained, sending a fresh wave of horror through Emily's veins. He pointed at the blinking indicator light. Based on his experience, he told her the device was equipped with a speed sensor and an accelerometer. The mechanism was designed to fully arm only when traveling at a consistent high rate of speed, like a car cruising down an interstate. The yellow light meant the device was in standby mode, waiting for the primary trigger. If Emily had kept her car above 65 miles per hour for just a few more minutes without stopping, it would have transmitted the detonation signal. Emily slapped a hand over her mouth, stifling a scream. She pictured herself alone on that pitch-black highway. If she hadn't stopped for gas, or if she hadn't been curious enough to dig into her bag, she would have kept her foot on the gas, desperate to reach her mother. Captain Reynolds' explanation made her realize she had just narrowly escaped death by a matter of minutes. The terrible gut feeling she had all night was a genuine warning from God keeping her alive. Within 20 minutes, the quiet substation turned into a chaotic staging ground. A matte black tactical truck belonging to the FBI, State Police Bomb Squad, rolled in sirens off to avoid drawing neighborhood attention. Technicians in heavy blast-resistant Kevlar suits piled out, hauling specialized equipment. They immediately secured the black box inside a spherical containment vessel. Captain Reynolds spoke quietly with the bomb squad commander, pointing toward Emily's white sedan parked at the far edge of the lot. Emily watched through the reinforced glass as the men discussed the situation, their faces grim. Occasionally, they cast pitying glances in her direction. Reynolds walked back over to Emily, who was frozen in her seat, clutching a paper cup of warm water a female deputy had given her. He crouched down to eye level, trying to make her feel grounded. "Mrs. Emily," he asked gently, "who had access to your bag and your vehicle before you left tonight?" Tears spilled over her eyelashes as she whispered the name. "Aaron. My husband." She recounted how he had packed the bag, put in the snacks, and warmed up the car. She explained his excuse about the crucial board meeting. As she spoke, Captain Reynolds' jaw clenched tightly. He was already piecing together the twisted puzzle. But he needed hard physical proof to confirm it, and he knew exactly where that proof was, in Emily's car. The EOD technicians approached the white sedan with extreme caution. They used long-handled inspection mirrors to check the undercarriage, sweeping the frame with metal and chemical sniffers. Emily watched the agonizing process, her heart hammering wildly against her ribs. Part of her prayed they would find nothing, hoping this was all just some colossal, insane misunderstanding or a terrible prank. But that fragile hope shattered when one of the technicians gave a sharp hand signal to his partner, pointing to a specific spot directly beneath the driver's seat. A brief moment of tension rippled through the squad, but their training took over. They deployed a small, remote-controlled treaded robot to extract the suspicious object without risking human hands. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. Finally, the robot successfully detached a heavy, brick-like package magnetically clamped to the chassis. The package was moved to a cleared, sandbagged blast zone. Captain Reynolds walked back into the lobby. He looked far grimmer than before. He sat beside Emily and let out a heavy sigh before speaking. His voice was low, carrying a truth that would destroy her reality. The bomb squad had recovered 4 pounds of C4 plastic, explosive, highly unstable, and devastatingly powerful. It had been wired with chilling precision, placed exactly beneath the driver's seat. It was hooked up to a wireless receiver, operating on the exact frequency of the detonator in her bag. Emily felt her entire world collapse. She couldn't hold back the sobs anymore. Her body shook violently. The gruesome image of her own body being blown to pieces on the highway looped relentlessly in her mind. She couldn't fathom that the car she used to drive to Sunday church or to pick up groceries had been turned into a rolling coffin, and the architect of her murder was her own husband, the man she had loved, respected, and shared a bed with for years. The sheer agony of that betrayal hurt far worse than the fear of death itself. Captain Reynolds let her cry, allowing the initial shock to run its course. Then, he needed to verify one last vital piece of the puzzle. He asked her again exactly why she was driving out tonight. Emily sobbed as she explained the frantic phone call about her mother's sudden illness. Reynolds, possessing the sharp instincts of a seasoned detective, immediately smelled a rat. He asked Emily to use the precinct's secure landline to call her mother right now to verify her condition. Emily hesitated. It was still the middle of the night, but with a trembling hand she dialed her mother's home number. The phone rang twice. Emily's heart was in her throat, terrified that no one would answer or that she'd hear terrible news. But on the third ring, a groggy, confused voice answered. "Hello." It was Martha. She sounded completely healthy, calm, and slightly bewildered. Emily burst into fresh tears, calling out, "Mom." Martha, startled by her daughter's crying, asked what was wrong. "Mom, are you sick? Are you in the hospital?" Martha actually chuckled softly. "Honey, I'm right as rain. I just woke up to get a glass of water and read my morning devotionals. Nothing's wrong at all." The receiver slipped from Emily's grip, dangling by its coiled cord. She stared at Captain Reynolds with hollow, haunted eyes. Her mother was perfectly fine. The 3:00 a.m. phone call was a lie. The panicked neighbor was an actor. It was all a script, a meticulously designed scenario to induce a panic attack, forcing Emily to drive alone in the dead of night, emotionally unstable, and speeding down the interstate so the bomb would arm and detonate. Aaron had orchestrated the entire thing with cold, terrifying precision. He wanted her to die in what would look like a tragic, high-speed single-car accident, leaving no room for foul play suspicions. Captain Reynolds gently led Emily into his private office. He turned his computer monitor toward her. The police cybercrimes unit, working at lightning speed, had already pulled a preliminary background check on Aaron. The financial data displayed on the screen was staggering. Aaron was drowning in millions of dollars of debt from a shady, collapsed tech startup investment he had kept entirely secret. All of his business assets were leveraged to the hilt, but the most sickening piece of evidence was a brand new, massive $5 million life insurance policy taken out on Emily. The policy had just been approved and activated 3 days ago. The primary clause: a full expedited payout if the insured died in a fatal traffic accident. Emily stared blankly at the screen. All the puzzle pieces finally snapped together, forming a monstrous picture. Aaron's recent overly sweet behavior, him packing her bag, warming up the car, the sudden critical board meeting, it was all a calculated performance to murder her for a payout. Her husband didn't just want her dead. He wanted to trade her life for cash to cover up his own greed and massive failures. A wave of nausea hit her. Her pure, unconditional love had been repaid with lethal poison. Amidst her shattered heart, Captain Reynolds looked her dead in the eye. He told her they couldn't let Aaron get away with this. The law had to be served, and Emily deserved justice. But to put Aaron away with an airtight case, they needed her help. He asked Emily if she was willing to do something highly risky, something that would trap Aaron in his own sick game. Emily roughly wiped the tears from her cheeks. The face that had just been contorted in fear and sorrow slowly shifted, hardening into something cold and resolute. Her normally gentle eyes sharpened, radiating an unbreakable will. She looked straight at Captain Reynolds and gave a firm nod. She was no longer a victim. She was ready to fight back. The air inside Captain Reynolds' office grew thick and heavy, as if the oxygen was being sucked out and replaced by the suffocating weight of reality. Emily sat rigidly across from the veteran cop's desk. Her hands were clasped so tightly in her lap that her knuckles were bone white. The tears had dried on her face, leaving a tight, sticky residue on her skin, but her eyes told a different story. If they had previously held the confusion and terror of a panicked wife, they were now filling with a terrifying void, the kind of emptiness created when complete trust is pulverized into dust. Reynolds placed a digital tablet on the desk and slid it slowly toward her, his movements hesitant. He looked reluctant, knowing that what he was about to show her was the final nail in the coffin of her marriage. He explained that the cyber unit hadn't just found the debts and the insurance policy. They had also cloned Aaron's phone data and were monitoring his digital footprint. They needed to see if he had accomplices, and through that wiretap an equally disgusting truth emerged. Emily looked down, forcing herself to focus on the glowing screen. It displayed a series of intercepted text messages between Aaron's number and a contact saved as VIP client, but the contents had nothing to do with corporate business. The language was intimate, littered with pet names and heart emojis that made Emily's stomach violently churn. According to police traces, the real name of the contact was Chloe. Emily knew that name. Chloe was a vice president at Aaron's firm. He constantly praised her sharp business acumen. She had even been to their house for dinner parties where Emily had welcomed her warmly and cooked for her. Emily's index finger trembled as she scrolled down, reading the back-and-forth exchange. The texts were sent right around the time Aaron had ushered Emily out the door. Aaron wrote, "The package is out for delivery," clearly referring to Emily driving away. Chloe's reply made Emily's blood boil. She complained in a whiny tone, asking how soon they could finally be free to enjoy the money from their big project. Aaron replied with a sickeningly sweet promise as soon as the tragic news broke tomorrow morning they would book first-class tickets for a month-long European vacation to celebrate their new financial freedom and official status. As a couple, it turned out the crucial board meeting was a complete fabrication. The texts revealed that Aaron and Chloe had reservations at a high-end rooftop steakhouse in downtown Chicago that afternoon to celebrate the success of their plan. Aaron was using it to build a rock-solid alibi, showing he was busy at a business lunch when his wife tragically crashed upstate. The betrayal was twofold. Aaron wasn't just killing her to pay off his debts. He was erasing her to start a lavish new life with his mistress. Emily felt like she had been living inside a stage play, where she was the only one who didn't know it was a tragedy. She placed the tablet back on the desk slowly, as if the glass was burning her fingers. She closed her eyes, taking a ragged breath that burned her lungs. The memories of Aaron smiling as he handed her a credit card for groceries or telling her how beautiful she looked morphed into the face of a terrifying monster. Every happy anniversary, every quiet night on the couch was annihilated, replaced by a profound, gut-wrenching disgust. She felt like an idiot. How naive she had been to trust this man implicitly, to devote her life to him, to pray for him every Sunday. Meanwhile, he was engineering her gruesome death with another woman. Captain Reynolds watched her transformation closely. Having spent decades working homicide, he knew this was the turning point for a survivor. This was the exact moment sorrow crystallized into rage, and rage, when directed properly, was the most lethal weapon in the room. Reynolds spoke in a low, commanding tone. He told her she had two options. Option 1, the police could swarm Aaron's house right now and arrest him for attempted murder. He'd go to jail, but the legal battle would be brutal, with no actual body and no explosion. A high-priced defense attorney could argue it was circumstantial, potentially getting him a reduced sentence. Option 2, Reynolds continued, was to play Aaron's game. They would let Aaron believe his master plan worked flawlessly. They would create the absolute illusion that Emily was dead. By doing this, Aaron would get sloppy. He'd feel invincible. And in his arrogance, he would make fatal mistakes that would provide undeniable, irrefutable evidence in federal court. The police didn't just want to bust him for planting a bomb. They wanted to catch him in the act of trying to profit from the murder. The moment he tried to cash that $5 million insurance check, the trap would snap shut. It would be an ironclad case of first-degree attempted murder and massive wire fraud, guaranteeing he would rot in federal prison for the rest of his natural life. Emily opened her eyes. The tears were gone. Her gaze was as cold and still as a frozen lake, hiding dangerous rushing currents beneath the ice. She thought of her mother, who almost lost her only daughter. She thought of how she almost died a terrifying, fiery death on a lonely stretch of interstate. The agonizing heartbreak in her chest hardened into titanium. She didn't want Aaron to do a few years in a white-collar resort prison and walk free. She wanted total, catastrophic ruin. She wanted him to fall from the absolute highest peak of his delusions. Emily looked Captain Reynolds dead in the eye and gave a sharp, definitive nod. She chose option 2. She would be the bait. Suddenly, Emily's phone sitting on the desk buzzed shortly. The screen lit up with an iMessage notification from Aaron. Her heart skipped a beat, a mix of pure hatred and conditioned anxiety. Reynolds raised a hand, signaling her not to touch it. He leaned over and read the preview text without unlocking the screen. "Hey honey, why haven't you texted? Where are you? I'm getting worried. I have a really bad feeling." To an outsider, it was the text of a loving, concerned husband. But to Emily and the seasoned detective, it was monstrous. Aaron was fishing. He was trying to confirm his target's status. Reynolds thought for a second, strategizing. He told Emily under no circumstances could she reply. Leaving the message on delivered, but unread, would feed Aaron's anxiety. If she replied, he would know she was alive and had her phone. Silence was their greatest weapon. Aaron would be forced to speculate. Did the bomb go off? Is she out of cell range? The not knowing would slowly eat away at his nerve. Emily obeyed. She left the phone untouched. Looking at his name on the screen made her physically sick. She wanted to scream at him, to call him and curse him to hell. But she bit her tongue. She realized that starting tonight, the old Emily, the sweet, accommodating, naive wife, had to die, so the new Emily could survive. She had to become a better actor than her husband. She had to be strong not just for herself, but to get justice and to protect her mother. Reynolds called his tactical lieutenants into the office. He began issuing rapid-fire orders. One team would transport Emily to a secure FBI safe house that couldn't be tracked by anyone. Another unit consisting of forensics and the EOD team would haul Emily's car to a specialized disposal site to execute a controlled detonation. They had to manufacture a highly convincing crime scene. The car needed to be obliterated as if it had crashed and burned on the highway. The charred wreckage would serve as the physical proof of Emily's tragic demise. Emily listened to the grim logistics. Quietly, she asked if she could watch them blow up her car. Reynolds hesitated, worried it would trigger severe trauma. But seeing the sheer, unyielding fire in her eyes, he agreed. Perhaps watching the vehicle burn would be a necessary catharsis, a symbolic funeral for her fake marriage. He ordered a deputy to fetch a Kevlar vest for Emily, strictly as standard safety protocol. Then they moved out. It was the darkest part of the night. But for Emily, this was no time to sleep. This was the dawn of a silent war. A war against the man who slept next to her every night. As she walked out of the precinct to the waiting unmarked SUV, she looked up at the starless sky. She made a silent vow Aaron was going to pay for every single tear she shed tonight. And she was going to be the one to collect the debt. A convoy of police vehicles tore through the empty night toward the desolate outskirts of the county. In the lead, a cruiser drove without sirens, its silent light bar slicing through the dark. In the middle, a heavy-duty flatbed tow truck hauled Emily's sedan, the C4 still attached to its belly. Bringing up the rear, Emily sat in an armored tactical vehicle with Captain Reynolds and two heavily armed SWAT officers. Their destination was an abandoned limestone quarry miles away from civilization. A site the bomb squad frequently used for controlled detonations of unstable ordnance. High rock walls surrounded the basin, perfectly designed to absorb the shockwave and muffle the sound of a blast. During the ride, Emily stared blankly at the back of the seat in front of her. Her mind drifted to that white car. It was a zippy little commuter car Aaron had bought her 3 years ago for their anniversary. She remembered how happy she was. She remembered Aaron handing her the keys with a giant red bow on the hood, hugging her from behind, and whispering that he wanted her to be safe and comfortable wherever she went. The sick irony that this safe gift was used as the instrument of her execution wasn't lost on her. It was a Trojan horse carrying her death. Every sweet memory tied to that car now felt like venom in her veins. When they arrived at the quarry, the air was freezing and dry. Gusts of wind kicked up clouds of white limestone dust. Portable halogen floodlights were set up, bathing the center of the pit in harsh clinical light. The sedan was carefully unloaded and positioned in the middle of the dirt expanse. The EOD techs went to work. They weren't defusing the bomb. They were rigging it to detonate remotely, but with a specific configuration to make it look like a catastrophic fuel tank explosion from a high-speed collision rather than a military-grade terror attack. This was crucial so the insurance investigators and highway patrol would buy the story of a tragic accident. Emily stood behind a concrete blast bunker about 200 yards away. Captain Reynolds stood beside her watching through binoculars. Before the countdown, an officer approached Emily asking if she wanted to retrieve any personal items from the car, or if there was anything specific she wanted left inside as evidence. Emily handed the officer her purse, but she asked him to leave one of her leather boots and the cashmere scarf she had been wearing inside the cabin. Those items, once scorched, would serve as grim identifiers for the coroner, proving she was inside during the inferno. The preparation felt agonizingly slow. Techs placed weighted crash test dummies in the driver's seat to simulate human body mass. They doused the interior and undercarriage with extra gasoline to ensure a massive sustained fire post-blast. The goal was to melt the frame down to the axles, erasing any forensic trace of Aaron's homemade detonator. Once everything was set, the siren blared, signaling all personnel to fall back to the safe zone. The quarry went dead silent, save for the wind and the crackle of police radios. The EOD commander began the countdown over a megaphone. 5, 4, 3. Emily held her breath. Her fingers dug into the concrete barrier. She didn't blink, staring at the little white car sitting lonely under the floodlights. It looked so fragile. 2, 1. Fire in the hole. Kaboom. A deafening roar ripped through the night. A massive, violent fireball of orange and black erupted into the sky, casting dancing demonic shadows against the limestone cliffs. The ground beneath Emily's feet shook violently. The shockwave hit her face like a blast from an open oven. Even from a distance, the sound made her ears ring. The white car instantly vanished inside the inferno, lifted slightly off the ground before crashing back down as a crumpled, blazing cage of twisted metal. Emily stared at the roaring flames, her eyes wide. The intense heat seemed to burn away whatever lingering doubts she had left. As she watched the frame warp and melt, she felt a part of herself die in that fire. The naive Emily, the woman who always compromised the wife who was blind to the monster in her bed, she burned to ashes in that car. Rising from that smoke was a new woman who would not stop until her husband was destroyed. A single tear rolled down her cheek, but not from sorrow. It was a strange, overwhelming sense of relief. She was alive. And Aaron had no idea. Once the fire was manageable, Captain Reynolds signaled the department's media liaison. As planned, they leaked a highly restricted bulletin to local highway traffic monitors and a few trusted late-night crime stringers. The headline: a fatal single-car accident on the interstate. Vehicle fully engulfed. Driver presumed dead at the scene. They timed it so Aaron would see it on the morning news or social media, rather than receiving a direct police knock on his door. They wanted his public reaction to be entirely his own doing. Just as the fire crews started hosing down the smoking wreckage, the phone in Reynolds' pocket buzzed. He pulled it out and looked at the screen. "It's him," Reynolds said flatly. It was a standard cellular call, not a text. Aaron was escalating. He was likely panicking because his texts went unread, or perhaps he was just playing his part, establishing a timeline of the worried husband. Reynolds showed the glowing screen to Emily. It displayed Aaron, along with a photo of the two of them smiling on a beach vacation. A fake memory. Emily shook her head, signaling him not to answer. Reynolds let it ring. Once, twice, 3 times. The standard iPhone ringtone sounded surreal against the backdrop of the smoldering car fire. On the 4th ring, Reynolds hit the red decline button. He immediately powered the phone down entirely and popped the SIM card out with a tactical pen. That specific sequence would send a chilling message. To Aaron, a call going to voicemail followed immediately by the phone. Losing signal completely meant one thing: the phone was destroyed in a catastrophic event. Emily's digital pulse had flatlined. To the outside world, Emily was now a ghost. Reynolds dropped the dead phone into an evidence bag. He looked at Emily. "Now we wait for him to make a move. We're taking you to the safe house. You cannot contact anyone, not your mother, not your friends, until I give the all clear. It's going to be hard, but it's the only way." Emily nodded resolutely. She took one last look at the blackened, smoking chassis of her car. The acrid smell of burnt rubber and gasoline filled the air. She turned her back and walked toward the armored SUV without looking over her shoulder. Her steps were steady and grounded. Tonight she learned that the person closest to you can be your deadliest enemy. And to defeat him, she had to become something he could never anticipate, a woman who feared nothing because she had already died once. The atmosphere in the private dining room of the exclusive downtown Chicago steakhouse was the epitome of wealth and privilege. The scent of dry-aged Wagyu beef mingled with the aroma of fresh lilies set on every mahogany table. At a prime corner booth overlooking the sprawling skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows, Aaron sat across from Chloe. On their table sat expensive desserts and 2 crystal glasses of sparkling water catching the light from the modern chandelier overhead. To anyone else, they looked like 2 highly successful executives enjoying a power lunch or a strikingly handsome couple. But Aaron's calm exterior was a very thin, very fragile mask. Beneath the polite smile, he gave the waiter his heart was hammering a frantic beat against his ribs. Since daybreak, he had been obsessively glancing at his phone, which sat face down on the table. His last text to Emily was unread. His call had gone straight to a dead signal. This total blackout was driving him insane. Did his plan work? Did the C4 go off on schedule? Or was there a technical glitch? Was Emily sitting in a police station right now spilling everything? The worst-case scenarios spun in his head like a centrifuge. Chloe, dressed in a sharp designer blazer and a sleek pencil skirt, noticed his knee bouncing under the table. She reached across and placed her manicured hand over his, giving it a reassuring squeeze that felt more like a demand. Leaning in close, she whispered, "Relax, Aaron. You look like you're about to have a stroke." She reminded him that today was supposed to be a celebration day, one of their new life. She hissed that if he kept staring at his phone looking like he'd seen a ghost, people were going to start getting suspicious. Aaron forced a tight smile, nodded, and took a sip of his water to wet his bone-dry throat. Suddenly, the ambient chatter in the restaurant died down. The massive flat-screen TV above the upscale bar, which usually played silent financial news, flashed to a red breaking news banner. The bartender, noticing the severity of the headline, grabbed the remote and turned the volume up. Aaron's head snapped toward the screen. His heart stopped. On the screen, a somber news anchor reported a horrific traffic incident on Interstate 90 northbound. The broadcast cut to shaky amateur cell phone footage taken by a passing trucker. The video was blurry, but it clearly showed a white sedan engulfed in an absolute inferno on the shoulder of the highway. Thick columns of toxic black smoke billowed into the sky. The anchor's voiceover detailed that the vehicle had exploded and burned to the ground, likely due to a high-speed collision with the concrete median that ruptured the gas tank. The driver, a female, was trapped inside and pronounced dead at the scene. In that split second, Aaron knew his cue. This was the performance he had rehearsed in his bathroom mirror 100 times. He intentionally knocked his crystal water glass off the table. It shattered loudly against the hardwood floor, drawing the attention of the entire dining room. Aaron stood up, his whole body shaking. He stared wide-eyed at the TV screen. "Emily," he screamed, his voice cracking with pitch-perfect, desperate agony. He pointed a trembling finger at the screen, acting as though he had miraculously recognized the burnt license plate of the white car. Chloe, perfectly hitting her mark, jumped up and wrapped her arms around him, playing the role of the horrified, supportive coworker. Aaron collapsed to his knees right there in the restaurant, burying his face in his hands, wailing like a man whose very soul had been ripped out. Waiters and patrons rushed over their faces, etched with genuine pity. They offered him napkins, water, and apologies. Aaron played them like a fiddle. He pounded his fist on the floor, sobbing about how he should never have let her drive alone, how much he loved her. Deep down in his chest, his heart soared. He smiled a wicked, invisible smile. Not a single person in that room doubted his grief. His alibi was now cemented in front of 30 wealthy witnesses. After the dramatic scene, Aaron, heavily supported by Chloe, stumbled out to his luxury SUV. They sped off toward the county morgue where the remains had been taken, according to the news report. As soon as the heavy car doors slammed shut and the tinted windows shielded them from the public, Aaron's tears vanished instantly. He wiped his face with a wet wipe, erasing the fake grief. He turned to Chloe, his voice dropping an octave into a cold, business-like tone. "Are the insurance documents finalized? Did you double-check the beneficiary clauses?" Chloe smirked, fixing her lipstick in the visor mirror. "Everything's perfect. And by the way, you deserve an Oscar for that performance back there." When they arrived at the morgue, the air was freezing and smelled heavily of formaldehyde. A few plainclothes detectives, including Captain Reynolds, were waiting in the lobby. Aaron immediately snapped his mask of mourning back on. He stumbled down the sterile hallway toward the stainless steel examination tables, where an orange body bag lay zipped up. A sympathetic medical examiner explained that the remains were severely carbonized and visually unidentifiable. However, they had recovered a few personal effects that survived the blaze: a charred piece of a cashmere scarf and a half-melted leather boot. The ME handed Aaron the items sealed in clear evidence bags. Aaron stared at the ruined boot. He recognized it perfectly. He had bought those boots for Emily last Christmas. He clutched the plastic bag to his chest and broke down into violent, racking sobs. He cried out her name, begging her to forgive him, swearing he would love her forever. From the corner of the room, Captain Reynolds watched Aaron's every micro-expression from behind dark sunglasses. He noticed how Aaron kept shooting impatient glances at the hospital administrator standing by the door, acting like a man who just wanted to get the paperwork over with. The pinnacle of Aaron's sociopathy came when he was asked to sign the release forms and consent to an autopsy. Aaron fiercely refused. He argued, voice shaking with righteous sorrow, that his wife had suffered enough in the fire, and he refused to let them cut her up like a science experiment. He demanded to lay her to rest immediately, but as the administrator handed him the pen, Aaron leaned in and whispered with fake panic, He asked exactly how fast the official death certificate could be issued. He claimed he needed it urgently to freeze her bank accounts and handle her estate. In reality, the death certificate was the golden ticket to cash the $5 million policy. The administrator, who had been thoroughly briefed by Reynolds beforehand, nodded sympathetically and said it would be ready by tomorrow morning. Aaron nodded quickly, a flash of greedy triumph lighting up his eyes for a fraction of a second. He turned and buried his face in Chloe's shoulder, hugging his supportive colleague. Hidden from the cops, he whispered directly into Chloe's ear. "We did it. The $5 million is ours." Chloe hugged him back fiercely, her mind already wandering to designer boutiques and Mediterranean yachts. What the two lovers didn't know was that in the adjacent observation room, standing behind a pane of one-way glass, Emily stood perfectly still watching the entire grotesque performance. Her heart, once full of warmth, was now a block of solid ice. She was ready to destroy him. 3 days passed since the theatrical funeral. A fresh mound of dirt sat in a pristine suburban cemetery, marked with a temporary wooden cross bearing Emily's name. But 6 feet under the mahogany casket was empty, weighed down by sandbags. It was a secret kept strictly between Emily and the state police. Aaron sat alone on the expensive leather sofa in his massive living room. The house felt radically different. Usually around this time in the evening, Emily would be bustling in the kitchen, cooking dinner, or sitting on the patio listening to her worship music. Now the McMansion was tomb quiet. The silence, which Aaron thought would be liberating, was actually oppressive. It made his ears ring. He took a sip of his black coffee. It had gone cold. Spread out on the glass coffee table in front of him was his paperwork: the life insurance policy, the official death certificate, the fake police collision report, and a spreadsheet of his debts. He felt like a king. The insurance company had processed his claim with shocking speed. They only needed one final in-person meeting tomorrow for a formal sign-off before wiring the money directly into his account. Aaron smiled widely. He pictured the zeros hitting his bank app. He would pay off his disastrous crypto debts, sell this suburban trap, and buy a penthouse downtown with Chloe. But his victory lap was slowly being interrupted by bizarre, unsettling things. Ever since he got back from the funeral, he felt like he was being watched. At first, he chalked it up to exhaustion and the lingering subconscious guilt of being a murderer. But the paranoia was manifesting physically. Earlier that afternoon, when he walked into the master bathroom, he was hit by a wall of scent. It was lavender and vanilla, Emily's signature perfume. The smell was so overpowering and fresh, it was as if she had just walked past him seconds ago. Aaron froze in the doorway, the hair on his arms standing up. He scoured the bathroom. Empty. The windows were locked. The AC was blowing normal air. He tried to rationalize it. Maybe she spilled a bottle before she left and the heat activated it, he thought. He rushed over, opened the window, and aggressively sprayed half a can of Lysol to kill the scent. He didn't want any trace of her left in the house, especially not one that triggered his adrenaline. As the night deepened, the psychological torture escalated. Aaron was hunched over his laptop, finalizing his wire transfer details, when he heard a faint sound coming from the kitchen. It was a soft, rhythmic sound. Very familiar. It was acoustic guitar and a female vocalist, Emily's favorite contemporary worship playlist. She used to play it on a little white Bluetooth speaker while she cooked. Aaron's blood ran cold. His heart slammed against his ribs. He knew for an absolute fact that he had powered that speaker down and shoved it into a junk drawer in the pantry because he hated her music. With tentative, shaky steps, he walked toward the kitchen. As he got closer, the music got louder. Sure enough, sitting right in the middle of the granite kitchen island, the little white speaker was glowing blue, playing the music at medium volume. Aaron stared at the device in sheer horror. Who turned it on? He was completely alone. He had given the housekeeper 2 weeks of paid leave, claiming he needed time to grieve in private. A mix of primal fear and violent anger boiled over. Aaron grabbed the speaker and hurled it as hard as he could against the tile floor. It shattered into pieces, the music dying instantly, leaving only the sound of Aaron's ragged, heavy breathing. "Who's messing with me?" Aaron screamed into the empty house. His voice echoed off the high ceilings. He ran around the first floor, frantically checking the deadbolts on the back doors and windows. Everything was locked tight. The alarm system was armed. No one had broken in. Cold sweat dripped down his temples. He rushed back to the living room and turned the massive TV on, cranking the volume to drown out his own thoughts. It's just a glitch, he told himself. Cheap electronics, short-circuiting. Bluetooth pairing weirdly, that's all. Exhausted by the sheer terror, Aaron decided to knock himself out with sleeping pills. He climbed the stairs to his bedroom, threw off his suit jacket, and collapsed onto his California king bed. He just wanted to close his eyes and wake up a multi-millionaire. He pulled the silk duvet up and let his head fall back onto his pillow. But instead of sinking into goose down, his skull cracked against something hard and metallic hidden inside the pillowcase. Aaron groaned, rubbing the back of his head. Annoyed, he sat up and shoved his hand under the pillow. His fingers wrapped around a cold, heavy metal box. He pulled it out. When he looked at it under the dim glow of his bedside lamp, his eyes widened so far they nearly popped out of his skull. The color drained from his face completely. It was the detonator, the black metal box with the toggle switch. The device that was supposed to have been vaporized in a 2000-degree fireball on the interstate. The bomb trigger he had built with his own 2 hands, and hidden in Emily's bag. Why is this here? His brain short-circuited. If the detonator is here, what the hell blew up the car? Aaron's hands shook so violently he nearly dropped it. Stuck to the bottom of the black box was a bright yellow post-it note. Written on it in neat, elegant cursive was handwriting he recognized instantly. Emily's handwriting. "You forgot to turn this off. Didn't want you to waste the battery. Emily." Aaron shrieked, hurling the detonator across the room as if it were a live rattlesnake. It bounced off the hardwood floor. He scrambled backward, crab-walking across the bed until his back slammed against the headboard, hyperventilating. This isn't a ghost. Ghosts don't move physical objects. Ghosts don't write passive-aggressive post-it notes. This was human. Someone was playing a terrifying game with him. Someone knew his darkest secret, and only one other person on planet Earth knew the exact details of the C4 and the detonator. Chloe. Aaron's mind snapped straight to his mistress. Chloe knew everything. Chloe was the one obsessed with the payout. She must have stolen the detonator out of the bag before Emily left without telling him. She was planting it to psychologically torture him, to blackmail him into giving her the entire $5 million instead of splitting it. Extreme paranoia eradicated whatever logic Aaron had left. He lunged for his phone on the nightstand and dialed Chloe's number. The moment she picked up, he didn't even let her speak. "You think this is funny, Chloe?" he roared, spit flying from his lips. "What the hell did you put in my bed? Are you trying to screw me over?" On the other end, Chloe sounded groggy and genuinely confused. "Aaron, what the hell are you talking about? I'm asleep in my apartment. Are you drunk? Don't lie to me," Aaron barked, pacing the room frantically. "The detonator is in my bed, with a note from Emily. You're the only one who knew about the trigger. You're trying to blackmail me, aren't you? You want all the cash." Chloe immediately lost her temper. "Are you out of your psychotic mind, Aaron? How would I even get into your house? I don't have a key, and why would I keep the murder weapon? You're hallucinating, because you're guilty. Take a Xanax and shut up, you're going to ruin everything." She hung up on him. Aaron threw his phone at the wall, shattering the screen. He pulled his hair, pacing like a caged animal. If it wasn't Chloe, then who? Was Emily still alive? Impossible. He saw the news. The police confirmed it. He held her burnt shoe in his own hands. The body was ash. So, who was doing this? Aaron looked around the dark corners of his luxurious bedroom. Suddenly, the mansion felt like a maximum security cell. The shadows seemed to twist and contort into mocking shapes. For the first time in his arrogant life, Aaron felt incredibly small, hunted by an invisible predator. What he didn't know was that while he was out at the funeral, Captain Reynolds's tactical team had installed micro-cameras in every corner of the house. And in an undisclosed safe house miles away, Emily was sitting in front of a glowing monitor watching her husband spiral into absolute madness with eyes colder than ice. The next morning, the sun rose brightly over the Chicago skyline, entirely indifferent to the darkness consuming Aaron's soul. He stood in front of his full-length mirror, adjusting the knot of his navy blue Tom Ford tie. He had used a touch of Emily's concealer to hide the dark, sunken bags under his eyes. He tried desperately to bury the sheer terror of the previous night beneath his expensive Italian suit. Today was the big day. The $5 million payout. He convinced himself that the music, the perfume, the detonator, it was all either Chloe playing a sick prank or he was having a severe stress-induced psychotic break. Regardless, once the money was in his offshore accounts, he would sell the house, immediately change his name, and disappear. Money cures all fear. Aaron picked Chloe up outside her luxury condo building. She looked stunning in a conservative but form-fitting designer dress, playing the role of his executive assistant. Grieving confidant. The car ride to the financial district was tense and silent. The hostility from their 3:00 a.m. phone fight lingered in the air. But the promise of unfathomable wealth forced them into a temporary ceasefire. Chloe hooked her arm through Aaron's as they walked into the towering glass and steel headquarters of the insurance conglomerate. The lobby was pristine marble, buzzing with confident people in suits. Aaron puffed his chest out. He was about to join the elite class, the untouchables. A VIP concierge greeted them with hushed, respectful tones and escorted them to the executive elevator, taking them to a sprawling boardroom on the top floor. The room featured a massive mahogany table, plush leather chairs, and a panoramic view of Lake Michigan. 3 men in sharp suits were waiting for them. They introduced themselves as the director of claims, the head of legal, and a corporate notary. They shook Aaron's hand with grim, sympathetic expressions, offering their deepest condolences for his unimaginable loss. Aaron deployed his tragic widower face, nodding weakly and thanking them in a convincingly shaky voice. The director of claims actually praised Aaron for being such a responsible provider, having the foresight to protect his wife's legacy. Aaron ate the praise up, though he managed to look appropriately humbled. Chloe sat next to him, opening a leather folio and pretending to take meeting notes, though her hands were practically vibrating with greed. The final payout documents were stacked neatly in a leather folder in front of Aaron. He just needed to provide one final signature and a biometric thumbprint. He could literally taste the victory, but the polite atmosphere in the room shifted abruptly. The head of legal cleared his throat and closed the folder. He stated that prior to the final signature, company policy required a mandatory review of the incident timeline as a formality for their internal auditors. He asked if Aaron minded if they played a brief presentation on the boardroom projector. Aaron waved his hand dismissively, assuming it was just a recap of the police report or a boring compliance video. Of course. Standard procedure, he said. The automatic blinds rolled down, dimming the room, and the massive projector screen dropped from the ceiling. Aaron leaned back in his leather chair, ready to sit through 5 minutes of corporate red tape before walking out a millionaire. The video started. But it wasn't a corporate logo or a timeline of the crash. It was grainy, black and white security footage. The camera angle looked down from the ceiling, showing a large, cluttered room. Aaron frowned. The room looked familiar. His heart rate spiked as he recognized the epoxy floor and the custom tool cabinets. It was his own garage. The timestamp in the bottom left corner read 2:15 a.m., the exact night Emily left. Aaron's breath caught in his throat. He watched the screen as a figure walked into the frame. It was him. He was wearing shorts and a t-shirt, carrying a heavy toolbox. On the screen, Aaron walked up to the white sedan, lay on a mechanic's creeper, and rolled under the driver's side of the car. The 4K resolution of the camera was sharp enough to see exactly what he was doing. He was wiring a brick of C4 to the chassis. Minutes later, the Aaron on the screen rolled out, dusted off his hands, and pulled the black detonator box out of his pocket, smiling at the car like he had just built a masterpiece. All the blood drained from Aaron's head, rushing to his feet. He felt like he was plummeting down an elevator shaft. He was paralyzed. He stared at the screen, which now zoomed in on his face, captured by a hidden security camera he didn't even know existed. Then it hit him. A year ago, he had installed a hidden cloud-based nanny cam in the garage because he suspected the landscapers were stealing his expensive tools. He had forgotten to turn it off. It had been recording to the cloud 24/7. The cyber unit had simply pulled his server logs. Aaron slowly turned his head to look at Chloe. She was just as pale. Her mouth hung open in silent horror. She slowly scooted her chair away from Aaron, as if he were covered in radioactive waste. Aaron looked back at the insurance executives. The men who had been smiling sympathetically moments ago were now staring at him with faces carved from stone. The director of claims looked at him with sheer, unadulterated disgust. The silence in the room was deafening, broken only by the hum of the projector looping his crime. Aaron opened his mouth, trying to find words. He wanted to scream that it was a deep-fake AI manipulation, a setup, but his vocal cords refused to work. He realized with crushing clarity that he had walked himself directly into a slaughterhouse. The video cut to black. A single line of red text appeared on the screen. Claim denied. Pending indictment for first-degree murder. The boardroom lights snapped back to full brightness, blinding Aaron. The heavy click of the boardroom doors unlocking echoed like a gunshot. Aaron snapped his head toward the door, praying that this was a nightmare that he would wake up in his bed. But as the heavy oak doors swung open, his final shred of sanity snapped. He screamed, kicking his legs, scrambling backward so violently that his chair tipped over. He fell to the carpet and crawled backward like a terrified child staring at the doorway, as if the devil himself had come to collect his soul. Standing in the doorway, backlit by the bright hallway lights, was Emily. She wasn't a ghost. She wasn't a burnt corpse. She stood tall, wearing an elegant beige trench coat and a silk scarf. Her face was bright, healthy, and fiercely beautiful, a stark contrast to the charred remains Aaron thought he had buried. She walked into the room with absolute poise. Every click of her heels on the hardwood sounded like a judge's gavel striking the block. Directly behind her was Captain Reynolds in his dress uniform, flanked by two massive FBI agents holding tactical rifles. "Get away, you're dead," Aaron shrieked hysterically, throwing his hands over his face. He completely lost his mind. To him, this defied all laws of reality. He built the bomb. He saw the explosion on TV. He held her melted shoe. How could she be standing here without a single scratch? In the corner, Chloe shrieked, diving under the mahogany table, realizing her life of luxury was officially over. Emily stopped 2 feet away from Aaron, who was currently a pathetic, sniveling mess on the floor. She looked down at him. This was the man she had vowed to love in sickness and in health. Her protector, her partner. Now he was nothing but a greedy, cowardly worm. She felt no love for him. She didn't even feel angry anymore. She just felt an overwhelming pity for how low a human being could sink for money. With a voice as calm as a frozen lake and sharp as a scalpel, Emily spoke. "I'm not a ghost, Aaron. I'm very much alive. My mother is perfectly healthy. And so am I. The only thing rotting here is your soul eaten alive by your own greed." Hearing her real physical voice, Aaron lowered his hands. He looked up at her with bloodshot, tear-filled eyes. His brain finally grasped reality. You're alive," he croaked. "But the car, the explosion on the news." Captain Reynolds stepped forward, his voice booming with authority. "Controlled detonation, Aaron. Staged by the bomb squad. We wanted to see exactly how far you'd go. We wanted to watch you fake your tears before you tried to steal $5 million. And you didn't even wait for the dirt on her fake grave to settle." Reynolds pulled out a pair of heavy steel handcuffs. "Aaron, you are under arrest for attempted first-degree murder, insurance fraud, wire fraud, and constructing an explosive device. You have the right to remain silent." Hearing the word arrest, Chloe crawled out from under the table, pointing a manicured finger at Aaron. "It was his idea. He forced me. I didn't build the bomb. He's crazy. I'm a victim here," she screamed, throwing her lover under the bus to save her own skin. Aaron glared at Chloe, betrayal mixing with his panic. "You bitch! You planned the Europe trip. You set up the insurance policy." He lunged toward her, but the 2 FBI agents instantly tackled him. They slammed him face first onto the mahogany table, wrenching his arms behind his back. Click, click. The sound of the heavy steel handcuffs locking around Aaron's wrists was the most beautiful symphony Emily had ever heard. Chloe didn't escape. She screamed obscenities as a female agent cuffed her and dragged her out of the room by her designer jacket. Aaron, pinned to the table, turned his head to look at Emily one last time. He shifted back to his manipulative, pleading persona. "Emily. Baby, please. I'm so sorry. I lost my mind with the debts. Please tell them it's a mistake. We can start over. I still love you." Emily slowly crouched down so she was eye level with his pathetic face pressed against the wood. She smiled, a genuine, radiant smile of absolute liberation. "Save your love for your cellmate, Aaron," she whispered, "and don't worry about the $5 million. It's not paying out. But those crypto debts, they're still waiting for you. Enjoy your living hell." Emily stood up, turned her back, and walked out of the boardroom without looking back once. She left Aaron screaming her name as the federal agents dragged him away. 6 months later, the morning air in the rural upstate countryside was crisp and sweet, free of city smog. Emily sat on the wraparound porch of her mother's old farmhouse. She was wrapped in a cozy cardigan, holding a steaming mug of black coffee. Next to her, Martha was sitting in a rocking chair, peacefully knitting a blanket, gazing out at the endless green acres of their property. There were no blaring sirens, no 3:00 a.m. phone calls, and no more looking over her shoulder. Emily picked up her iPad from the wooden table. She opened a national news app. The top headline featured mugshots of Aaron and Chloe in orange prison jumpsuits. The headline read in bold letters, "Maximum sentence. Executive who bombed wife's car for $5M insurance payout gets life in federal prison. Assets seized." The article detailed how the federal judge found absolutely zero mitigating factors. The crime was deemed so callous and premeditated that Aaron was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. He would spend the rest of his days locked in a concrete box, penniless and universally despised. Chloe accepted a plea deal, receiving 20 years in a federal women's penitentiary for conspiracy to commit murder and fraud. Emily read the article with mild detachment. The burning hatred she had felt 6 months ago had faded, replaced by profound, quiet gratitude. God had saved her in an unimaginable way. During the legal fallout, a judge had voided Aaron's fraudulent mortgages, returning Emily's rightful assets to her. She sold the massive suburban McMansion with all its terrible memories and used the cash to buy the sprawling farmland surrounding her mother's house. Together, they had started a massive organic greenhouse and nursery business. The money was more than enough to live a simple, incredibly fulfilling life. "Your coffee's gonna get cold, sweetie," Martha's gentle voice broke Emily's thoughts. Emily looked over at her mother and beamed. "I know, Mom. What are you reading so intently on that screen?" Martha asked innocently. She didn't know the gruesome details of the bomb. To protect her mother's weak heart, Emily had simply told her that Aaron was arrested for massive corporate fraud and embezzlement, leading to a swift divorce. "Nothing important, Mom. Just an article about some bad people finally getting what they deserve," Emily said, clicking the iPad off and tossing it onto the table. She took a long sip of her coffee, feeling the warmth spread all the way down to her toes. She watched a flock of sparrows dart across the morning sky, totally free and untethered. She felt exactly like them. She was no longer a woman trapped in fear, subservient to a monster. She was a woman who had walked through the fire and forged her own strength. The terrifying storm had passed and the sky above her was brilliant, endless blue. Emily closed her eyes, sent up a silent prayer of thanks, and then let out a loud, joyous laugh as her mother started telling a ridiculous story about the neighbor's runaway chickens. Life was beautiful. And Emily was finally truly living.